Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're doing another deep dive, and we're tackling a really complex and, let's face it, pretty persistent topic.
That's right. We're talking about the ongoing discussion around vaccines and autism.
Exactly. It's generated so much debate over the years, and we want to explore it today, maybe from a slightly different angle, looking at some points raised by a very significant figure in health research.
Yeah, we're focusing on some remarks from Dr. Bernadine Healy, and just for context, she wasn't just any doctor. She was the director of the NIH, the National Institutes of Health.
Right, a huge role, the main government body for medical research in the U.S. She held that position before Francis Collins, so she definitely had serious scientific credentials.
Absolutely. Top tier.
So our goal here today isn't really to settle the debate, vaccines do or don't cause autism. That's way beyond our scope.
It's massive, yeah.
Instead, we want to unpack Dr. Healy's specific perspective. What were her concerns? What did she think was being perhaps overlooked?
And one of the really striking things she mentioned was this feeling, this concern within the NIH about digging too deep into whether certain groups of kids might be more susceptible to vaccine reactions.
Okay, susceptible groups.
Yeah.
Why would there be hesitation there? What was the reasoning behind that, according to her?
Well, the way Dr. Healy described it, it really boiled down to fear, specifically fear of public reaction.
Public reaction? Like how?
The worry was essentially that if scientists identified any group, even a really small one that might be more vulnerable to a vaccine side effect, it could spark widespread panic.
Okay. So the fear was that it might undermine trust in vaccines overall and hurt public health efforts.
Precisely. That identifying a potential risk for a few could, scare everyone off getting vaccinated against diseases we can actually prevent. So potentially doing more harm than good from a public health standpoint.
That's a tricky balancing act. So it sounds like the idea was maybe don't look too closely for the greater good.
That's certainly the impression her comments give. Now, what's really interesting is her own journey with this question, the actual vaccine autism link hypothesis.
Yeah, what was her personal take?
She said she started off pretty skeptical, which, lines up with the vast majority of scientific studies.
Right. The overwhelming consensus has been, for a long time, no causal link found.
Exactly. But Dr. Healy mentioned that as she looked deeper at the basic science, animal studies, individual case reports, and even the evidence against a link, she arrived at a different place.
Okay. And where was that?
Her conclusion, in her words, was that the question has not been answered.
So, not saying there is a definite link, but that we maybe don't know the full story yet, especially for certain individuals.
That seems to be the nuance. It wasn't about a blanket statement. She was focused on the possibility of identifying children who might be, uniquely susceptible.
Susceptible how? What kind of things did she mention?
She brought up a few possibilities, maybe genetic predispositions or metabolic differences. She specifically mentioned mitochondrial disorders, for example.
Okay, mitochondrial disorders. That's about how cells produce energy, right?
Yeah, basically the powerhouses in your cells aren't working quite right. Or maybe, she thought, differences in immune system function. Things that could make a child react differently, perhaps not to all vaccines, but maybe to a specific vaccine, or even an ingredient like mercury, which was used as a preservative back in the day in some vaccines.
And the key point for her, it sounds like, wasn't about blaming vaccines broadly.
No, not at all.
It was about finding those kids who might be at higher risk beforehand.
Exactly. Her argument was if we could identify these potentially susceptible children, whether through genetic screening or metabolic tests or whatever, then we could actually protect them.
By changing their vaccine schedule, maybe? Or using different formulations.
Yeah, precisely. Things like that. It was about tailoring the approach, making vaccinations safer for everyone, including those who might have underlying vulnerabilities. It wasn't anti-vaccine, it was pro-safety through personalized understanding.
Okay, so let's just quickly recap her main points as we understand them. First, this internal concern she perceived at NIH about the public fear factor potentially stopping research into susceptibility.
Right, the potential backlash.
And second, her personal conclusion, after looking into it, that the question of whether some individuals might be susceptible wasn't fully closed, that it remained for her an open question.
Yeah, that sums it up well. And again, it's vital to frame this as her perspective we're exploring today. The wider scientific community largely holds a different view on the general link.
Absolutely. So thinking about Dr. Healy's points, It does raise some pretty big questions, doesn't it? What are the real implications if we do investigate individual susceptibility more deeply? What if we find something?
And conversely, what are the risks if we don't look, maybe out of that fear she described?
It really highlights the complexity, you know?
Yeah.
Balancing population-level health strategies with individual biological differences and potential risks definitely gives you something to mull over.
For sure. A lot to think about there.